Hi everybody, this is Dan Stolebarger. Welcome to this week's KFIR Middle East Update. It's the week of January 20th. A few days we'll be having the inauguration of a new president. There's a lot that's going on. I don't know if you can feel it. I do feel the tension that is really worldwide. Let's take a look at some of the reasons for those tensions. U.S. President Donald Trump's transition team has informed a number of U.S. allies that it intends to go forward with its plans to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, continues to be growing, obviously, in the White House scheme of things and his position. He told PA leaders in Ramallah last week that the U.S. is very serious, this is not rhetoric, very serious about moving the embassy. This has caused quite a consternation among the Palestinians. Abbas has basically said, if you move the embassy, the responsibility for all the blood that's going to be shed will be upon Trump. Actually, Abbas met with the Pope last week and told him if this actually happens, if the embassy moves, it will be opening up the gates of hell. The PF Mufti basically says that the move of the embassy is not only an attack on Palestinians, but rather on all Arabs and all Muslims. It just goes on and on and on. A Fatah official basically came out to say transferring the American embassy to Jerusalem will absolve us from all of agreements, and it will turn Palestine into a complete war zone. So as I said, a lot's going on this week with a new president in town. We'll have to wait and see. From the Israeli point of view, and that's what this Middle East update attempts to give you, it's sort of out with the old and in with the new. Obama essentially has eroded the U.S. superpower status, and he's leaving behind a far more dangerous world than the one he inherited. A Trump administration may give Israel reason to be optimistic, although one must remember Trump is where he's at because he has been a very shrewd businessman. So again, we're going to have to wait and see. A reminder to make sure you go to our website, Holy Ground Explorations, get the PowerPoint presentation because I'm going to include the link to the YouTube video that I'm just about ready to refer to. So make sure you check that out. A filmmaker put this together in Israel to kind of counteract what Kerry said last week about these settlements and how they're so dangerous and making it impossible for Palestinians to get from point A to B to C, and the whole checkpoint situation. This YouTube, you'll see that the actor, the Horowitz, or the writer, he recounted driving hundreds of miles crisscrossing the West Bank back and forth several times, encountering no difficulties. He did a lot of interviews with Palestinians, all of whom says it takes him about 10 minutes at most to wait in line at a checkpoint. And this whole thing about soldiers, 1 minute to deal with papers. And just as a reminder, it was on December 28th that Kerry made such a point of these military checkpoints in the West Bank that can create such an ordeal and create such havoc. You have to see this video for yourself. Interesting, everything that's transpiring. Yehuda Glick, friend of ours from Holy Ground Explorations, was at one point one of the main guys at the Temple Institute. Now he's a member of Likud, and he's a Knesset member. There was an attempt on his life, but if you remember, in terms of his stance on the Temple Mount. But for the first time in recent memory, 2 Israeli lawmakers are planning on attending the inauguration of Donald Trump. Glick, as well as Sharon Haskell, both from the Likud party, have confirmed their participation in Friday's ceremony in Washington, D.C. We're also been told that a number of the leaders of the settlement movement are planning on attending this event as well. And you have to understand that the attendance of Israeli political figures at a swearing-in ceremony of an American president is unprecedented. So once again, we're going to have to wait and see this, what seems to be an alliance between the Trump administration and at least Likud. Maybe not so much the Israeli left parties, but definitely Netanyahu's party. Well, as Netanyahu stated, I like this quote. He says, "The Paris Peace Confab was like a marriage counseling session without either husband or wife present." And so, we were wondering what would take place, and truly it just fizzled out. And where there's not really a concern that there'll be any sort of concrete outcome of this Paris peace plan at the UN Security Council coming up. The reality is what we all know to be true. There will be no peace in the Middle East until the 2 primary parties sit down to negotiate a peace plan. Now, I may be pretty skeptic whether that will ever happen, but there's no way that this can happen by some sort of outside party making plans and drawing lines on a map saying, this is it, you guys now abide by it. Ridiculous. Before we sign off this week, I kind of wanted to give you a reflection from a guy's newsletter that I get, kind of from the far right, a bit Jewish, hawkish, militant. But as I read this, I thought, there's something about this. It's called Food for Thought. Under Obama rule, the anti-Semitic world shook off the Holocaust guilt and began planning for the next one. And we know, by the way, there will be a next one. It's what the Bible tells us. For quite a while, they were waiting for the opportunity to unleash a new assault on the Jews. And so vilification of Israel, support for a fake people is now part of the anti-Semitic plan. But now, American and European schools are dropping Holocaust study with the excuse that it's to avoid offending the Muslims. Let that sink in. Why should the Muslims be offended by the Holocaust study? This was an issue. They played a minor point before 1948, the rise of Nazi Germany and the Third Reich. But once again, for fear of offending Muslims, our schools are dropping Holocaust studies. Food for thought. What's around the corner? What's next? Well, that's it for this week's presentation. Again, we always seek to give you insights through Israeli eyes as far as what's taken place in the Middle East. I may be able to get one more YouTube done before we leave for Israel. This Sunday, my wife and I will be leaving for San Diego. My mom has gone to be with Jesus. She passed away this week. She knew the Lord. And so we're both saddened and gladdened that her suffering is now over. And her funeral will be next week, so we'll be down there for the funeral, obviously. And then a week from Sunday, we'll be flying to Israel. And we'll be in Israel with our pastor and his wife for about 8 days, and then we have our Talmudim group, our work group, coming for a couple weeks. And so we'll be in Israel for most of February, and while we're there, it's not always possible for me to get the YouTubes up, but there will always be a weekly Middle East update PowerPoint on our website. So make sure you check all that out. And again, all of that will come from the land of Israel. And you'll also notice on this PowerPoint presentation our upcoming tours in the spring to Israel on April 23rd to May 1st, followed by, and it is also a standalone, an extension to Poland. Again, we must remember everything that's taking place, whether the swords are rattling or everything that's going on, this fear, this crying wolf about blood being spilled, the gates of hell being opened. Hey, it's all in the Bible. We know that as the end draws near, the crosshairs will be on Jerusalem, specifically on the Temple Mount. And one must wonder what would transpire when, if and when America does make that statement of standing stronger with Israel than ever before. We'll have to wait and see. But truly, let us be praying for the peace of Jerusalem and also for the peace of our country as well. With that, God bless you and shalom.